the 6 cows. They then take off down the highway as Guns N' Roses' Cold November Rain is playing on the tape deck as they speed off onto the highway. Meanwhile, Betsy is talking to 6 of the workers about feeding the remainder of the cattle in barns and getting the bull ready for the auction in Houston. 4:40 a.m. Back at the Center for Visually Impaired, JR and Brent meet together over Dr. Pepper's. Both JR and Brent had finals in the foreign language lab at the same time. Brent was taking his first freshman French class. So now, they're kicking back before heading to the student union for a quick cinnamon roll. However, that would change. At 5:10 a.m., JR and Brent go to the second floor kitchen in Gordon Hall, where Brent shares some cinnamon rolls with JR. Their plan after their final that morning was to zip on over to the Center for Public Affairs Library to study for their government final. 5:25 a.m. In the truck, Kyle and Seth smoke some cigarettes, listening instead to country music on the radio as they head toward Fort Stockton. At the same time, 1 hour later, in Washington, D.C., Clark told Jim that they would be staying in the estate of John and Alice Evans of Evans Energies. They were originally from Oklahoma and New Mexico, but had settled in for the solar energy in Fort Lauderdale. 7:20 a.m. Eastern. Jim calls Betsy on the phone. "I'm flying to you Wednesday morning," Betsy said. "Well, you'll be happy to know I repurchased that estate in Georgetown. Offices, a pool, good staff for the kids. Some good stuff for the kids," Jim said. "I miss you," Betsy said. "I miss you. And I'll tell you something. This Friday, we're going to have a party at the Evans estate in Houston like no other. See you Wednesday. Call me then." 7:30 a.m. and 7:20 a.m. JR, Brent, and Stoney take the bus from the student union to the foreign language building for their finals. 8:30 a.m. Eastern. While JR is taking his Spanish final, Jim, Claude, and Greg Sanders crawl into a stretch limo to take them to Dulles International Airport. Greg was delighted that he was coming on the Sanders private jet, while Norma flew on Air Force Two. Evidently, NSR wanted Norma to cover Hillary Clinton, but they wanted Greg to cover Jim. 8:30, 8:50 a.m. Eastern. Jim and his party arrive at Dulles International Airport and prepare to board the Sanders jet, where Chuck Bates would fly them directly to the executive airport at Fort Lauderdale. 9:35 a.m. Eastern. The Sanders jet departs from the gate at Dulles International Airport and begins its flight towards runway. 9:05 a.m. Central. JR and Blair are studying in the library when Dr. Andrew Harmon walked toward them. "Gentlemen, these are your new schedules. Interpersonal communications is being moved to a new professor." And I looked at the correct column. You guys are supposed to be taking the correct course you guys are supposed to be taking is business and professional communication next semester. Marlene Diedrich, Harmon said. Rima Jacobson said I had to take interpersonal communications, Jared said. Rima Jacobson is inept. Your father wants her off your disability case, Harmon said. It's just a different class, same time, same room, same professor. 10:05 a.m. Central. Meanwhile, in Fort Stockton, Kyle was so far able to sell 2 of the 6 cows. 10:20 a.m. Central. What did I do that for? I should do that. JR is now studying with Jennifer Bowers. Brent went back to his dorm room to rest. 12 p.m. Eastern. The Sanders jet taxis down the runway and lands in the executive Fort Lauderdale Airport. Jim rented a Chrysler van with 1994 model, and together they drove to the estate of John and Ellen Evans to stay at out of the States in Florida. 12:20 p.m. Eastern. Jim's party arrives at the Evans estate, currently owned by Baron Robert Evans. He was out of town in Louisiana this week. And so Jim and the Sanders were renting this estate along with the servants. Fernando, the gardener, took Jim's luggage up to the 3rd floor. Balcony room he had that he was staying in, which was once owned by John Evans Jr., who left for England in May 1991. Their next step was to drive soon to Nova Southwestern University for Jim to make his business speech. 1:09 p.m. Eastern. Jim's entourage loads up in the car and drives to Southeastern University School of Business, where Jim would talk about the future of small business economic development. Meanwhile, an hour behind, JR is having a cheeseburger lunch at the Spirit Club with Brent Clark and Tom Newcastle. The Newcastle Ranch was just across the street from the Hendrick Ranch at Swingfield. 2 p.m. Central. In a small, 2 p.m. Eastern, rather. In a small MBA class at Southeastern University School of Business, Jim gives his talk about the future for small businesses and economic development. 2:35 p.m. Central. JR is in his room studying for his government final. 3 p.m. Kyle and Festus arrive home at the ranch. Kyle walks into the house and hugs his wife, Madison. Tonight they were having chicken tenders. Tomorrow Kyle had to milk and feed the goats. Some of the workers would be taking 8 of the ranch's 56 goats for auction in Houston, and Kyle would be taking 8 bulls. $7:50 p.m. JR and Jennifer are at the library studying for the government final. Jennifer gives JR some good talking points for the major essay portion of the exam. Meanwhile, at the same time, his father is taking a dip with Greg and Norma Sanders at the indoor swimming pool of the Evans estate. Tomorrow he was going to be speaking at Florida International University School of Business about managerial innovation. 8 p.m. Central. Sitting together in the library, JR, Brent, and Jennifer discuss the government final. Over dinner, Brent had given JR insights from books to help with the large essay portion of the exam. 8:25 p.m. At the ranch, Betsy is watching TV with Elizabeth and Christine. Kyle is fast asleep. December 7th, 3:25 a.m. Jay wakes up coughing, and so he begins packing his bags for the trip home. The dorms would be open until December 15th. But JR was ready to get home. This morning, he'd gotten the chance to go ahead